Milk. I drink it. You might drink it. You might be lactose intolerant, but you also might be like a buddy I had in college and drink it anyway and give yourself a tummy ache. Me personally, I love milk. In America, you buy milk in a plastic gallon or half-gallon size container with a built-in handle and a twist-off top. And before that, we were buying it in cardboard cartons. But in a lot of other countries, like a lot of them, they buy milk in a bag. I know. It's so foreign to me, a member of, I guess, what could be called the Deep South. Folks go out, they buy a bag of loose milk, they bring it home, they put it into the designated milk pitcher, they snip the tip on that bag, and that's just how they got their milk. But why are we discussing this, though? Why am I going on a tangent about milk? Maybe you just didn't read the title. Maybe I'm just being a little quirky. Maybe I just really like milk. Maybe I'm doing this because it's a trope in online video essays. Or maybe it's because I played a surreal little indie game called Milk Inside a Bag of Milk Inside a Bag of Milk. Milk Inside a Bag of Milk Inside a Bag of Milk, or as I'm going to be calling it from here on, Milk, is a short visual novel made by Nikita Kroyakov. Probably not saying that right, I'm so sorry. And let me tell you, it's not really about the milk. Before we begin, I would suggest you play Milk for yourself. When I say it's a little game, I really do mean that. You can get all of the endings in maybe 20 minutes, and you can get it on Steam and itch.io for like $2 at the most. Pretty please. Go support an indie creator and experience the game for yourself. However, if you can't, for whatever reason, or you just want a refresher, I'm going to go over the entire story. So from this point on, there will be spoilers. Before we get into the story, I want to thank you for watching. If you enjoy this video, hit the like button, and if you want to be super cool, you could also subscribe to my channel. It's free, and it gets me closer to my goal of 500 followers by the end of 2026. Again, thanks for watching. Let's dive into Milk. The first thing that really strikes you when you open Milk is the limited visuals. There are a total of 3 colors used. There's black, dark red, and pink. There's no variance between any of these colors. It is all stark pixel art with hard edges, and at times it can be difficult to interpret what you're actually looking at. The sound design is also really peculiar. The soundtrack itself is really quiet, but what you can make out is like an ambient urban music. I don't really have a better way of describing it other than that. You can buy the soundtrack outright on Steam for sure, and also I believe on itch. But over top of that, you'll be hearing what I'm pretty sure is the Microsoft narrator text-to-speech voice reading literally every piece of text on screen. You may find that this puts another layer between you, the player, and the protagonist, making her more mystical and alien in the process, but as we go through, you'll see that the writing itself portrays a protagonist who desperately wants to be seen and known as human. So, the protagonist needs to go and buy milk, and we are tasked with helping her. Notably, we enter our name before the story begins. I put in Burger. It's clear from the get-go that something is not right with the protagonist. You can even ask who she's talking to, and she says she's imagining that she's the protagonist of a visual novel. How meta. The task at hand doesn't seem like it would be hard. Most folks, I feel like, would not need assistance to walk down the street, go to the store, and buy milk. But she's nervous. She's rehearsing what she's going to say. And eventually, she comes to the realization that she's been walking with one foot in the grass and one on the sidewalk, and it upsets her enough that you have to help her undo the incorrect steps to walk backwards so that she can then redo the steps correctly. And this part specifically really screams OCD to me, which could also be seen in the rehearsal of what she's going to say at the store, although we don't really get the end result of the steps compulsion as clearly as we do with the rehearsal. We assume, like the rehearsal that it would result in her not being able to get milk, and that's the whole point of the outing, but it's not really clear like how that path follows. But either way, it doesn't matter what exactly the protagonist has. I just found it interesting that this moment in particular was what felt like a very blatant OCD moment from what I could tell. And when she finally gets to the shop, inside there's a thing that is supposed to be a person, and our protagonist gets stuck in a loop of saying, "I'm sorry, what?" to only get the reply from the person, "Oh." Oh, as in Oscar, the letter O. We get a couple of rounds of, "I'm sorry, what? Oh, I'm sorry, what? Oh." It's awesome. And when you try to intervene, the protagonist insists that this person knows that the letter O scares her. And instead of explaining in words, she shows us why the letter O scares her, and we get this screen that, to me, looks like a pupil that we're slowly being sucked into. Yeah, it's kind of scary. This image being shown to us costs the protagonist a dozen nerve cells, apparently. This is not explained. A lot of things are not explained, actually. The protagonist finally manages to grab the milk, and while observing the milk, we get a semi-title drop. As the protagonist begins going off on a tangent about milk inside a bag of milk inside a bag, we have to give her a little push along, saying specifically, "Hurry up, or you'll get it at home again." At the counter, the cashier is similar to the last person we saw, which is just another weird creature. There's some complication with actually buying the milk, but when we give another nudge, the protagonist remembers that she has to hand over the money to pay for the milk. Or, rather, the bag with the milk inside. As we leave the store, the protagonist notes that the bag is heavy and reminds her of when she was in physical therapy. This note specifically feeds into a theory that we're going to put a pin into and come back to later. Walking along the road, the protagonist is rushed by a giant bear with glowing red eyes, screeching as it passes. That's what she says, anyway. We, the player, have to clarify with her that it was a truck. The protagonist doesn't seem to want to accept this, asking if someone would really try and kill an innocent girl holding a bag of milk. You have two very notable options at this moment. The first is to tell her that she's sick, and this doesn't really read as antagonistic as some of the other options we've had. It seems, personally to me, I could see it as more of like a gentle letdown to just kind of let her know, that she is sick and that affects things. But I decided to tell her that the world is a cruel and dangerous place instead, because that's the truth. You and I both know it. But the delusion remains for our protagonist as she denies living in the same world as us. As we continue, she talks about other things that seem to defy reality, like being able to ignore traffic lights when she's in a hurry because they magically turn themselves off, or that when she needs to cry, a rain cloud appears over her head just so that she can hide her tears. When this reality is questioned, she simply replies, "What else could it be?" The concept of this not being the truth is unfathomable to her. And yet, in the same breath, if pushed further, discussing her pills not working, and then that this is nothing to do with the pills at all, she says she's tired and just wants to go home and go to bed. I made the decision to have a final push, even past this, telling her, you have to accept the truth, pushing through multiple iterations of her denying it, but my insisting that you have to accept the truth, and this earned me the bad ending, which is an eerie screen with the protagonist staring back at me. The words, "Looks like burger doesn't help me at all. I guess I'll try something else next time," coming onto the screen. When it restarted, I input my name as Burger again, and she recognized it, saying, "Again? I hope we can do it this time." When you don't pressure her into accepting that she's mentally ill, you come to the realization that she's been aware this entire time and is also entirely aware that this is a visual novel and has a discussion with us, the player. Not the character we as the player are playing, as meta as that is, but the actual you, the person one layer above the pick and choose options. She sits on a bench and looks up at the sky, and we get a new background that I'm not entirely sure how to make out. I'll show it on the screen. This section has a lot of ambiguous backgrounds. If you all can figure anything out from these, then absolutely tell me about it in the comments. I could kind of understand this being the sky if there weren't the black specks in the middle. She admits that she's aware that she has mental illnesses, and it's just slowly going downhill for her. The medications are becoming less and less effective, so ultimately things will happen painlessly, I hope. Do you know what I'm talking about? At this point, we have a prompt to type in an answer, but since it's a yes or no question, there's really only 3 things you could answer. Yes, no, or maybe. Properly progress by saying that yes, you do know what she's talking about. She goes on to say she doesn't want to name her diagnoses in an effort to let us see beyond the labels and stigma that those come with. Again, emphasizing to me how human she desperately wishes to be seen and felt as. She reveals that a specific event happened to her, and now all she sees is red everywhere, specifically naming it blood. So we can then make the connection that the scenes we've been seeing with the limited color palettes are in fact how she sees the world. This is also likely the event that was the catalyst for her mental and maybe even physical struggles to first escalate. She asks us to promise not to ask about what happened, and we get our next write-in prompt. When we reply that maybe we'll promise, she seems resigned to her fate, saying, "I'm just talking to myself. Sooner or later, I would have brought it up." We're brought to another screen, far more ambiguous than the last, and we are prompted, "What do you see?" And I'll be real with y'all, I got no fucking clue what I see here. The longer I look at it, the more garbled it gets. Maybe one of you all can see something more, but I'm sure that it is supposed to be confusing, especially because the prompt is so open-ended. But the correct answer here is corpse. And for the rest of it, I think I'll just let the protagonist explain.
I won't waste time. What do you see? Right. This is my dad. Some of his parts, at least. We do have a very difficult family. But despite all the problems, I never would have thought. Sorry, I shouldn't have raised my voice. Anyway, he jumped out the window and died. This is my last memory. Then, a long gap. Strange, very strange.
She continues without really explaining much else, but is very happy that we've helped her, saying this is the first time she's bought something at the store without a major incident. She even removes the border on the text box in an effort to lessen boundaries, which I think is kind of cute. But eventually, she cuts herself off, and we let her know it's probably time to go home. So we do. There are several flashes here indicating travel, and I think what we can discern from them is telling about her life. There's random bushes, something that resembles the O but from a different angle, and what looks to me to be the view from her apartment floor. Specifically, it calls to mind a tower where you go up and up and up, and all along the inside are doors to the apartments, and the way it's rendered here suggests it goes up a crazy high amount. Also to note, she says that she hangs over the railing at her apartment in an effort to get rid of her fear of heights. And it is at this exact moment that the medication has worn off, leaving her in silence. Inverted from the expectations a lot of us would have on medicating severe mental illness like this, the medications create noise within her head. Inside the apartment, we're greeted by her mom, I guess. It really looks more like the face on a traditional Japanese porcelain doll, but really, really close up and in our face, smiling and unblinking. She doesn't greet the protagonist, just immediately asks, "Did you bring the milk?" Even repeats it when the protagonist greets her. And as we both know, yes, she did bring the milk. Did your new medicine help? And again, the protagonist says yes. Mom tells her go to bed, and the protagonist obeys. The final screen is her mother staring silently. Not even an ellipses, just completely blank. That's the end of Milk. Now let's go back to the pin on the theory. Here is what I'm getting when I read between the lines here while playing Milk. The protagonist is in a household with an abusive mother. She may be both physically and emotionally abusive given the single interaction with her that we get. This could also give us a glimpse into what life was like before the inciting incident in the protagonist's life. As far as the incident itself, I think she's made it very clear that her dad did, in fact, end his own existence by jumping out of a window. The concerning part is that what we're shown is that his body is in pieces and not all of it made it to the ground, possibly. It's that, or it took a while to find him, maybe, allowing parts of him to be carried off by wildlife. However, there's also the possibility that it was just an intensely tall drop. After all, we get that image of the protagonist looking down her apartment railing, and that shit looks dizzying. To go back to the apartment railing, she tells us that she does that to eliminate her fear of heights. Now, she could just have a fear of heights. I know I do. Don't get me on a glass floor or a bridge. You will see me dry heave and cry. Now, if it was just a regular fear of heights, I don't think it would have been included in the game. The game is so short, and everything put in is so deliberate, I struggle to believe that Nikita Kryakov would put it in otherwise. And then there's also the mention of physical therapy. And all of these points are leading me to one thought. What if her dad wasn't the only one who had a fall out the window? To me, it sounds like she wasn't in a great household to begin with. She's afraid to raise her voice. It's pretty clear she's the victim of abuse, and upon seeing her father's lifeless body, there's a huge gap of lost time. What if she also took the tumble and was unconscious for a long time, holed up in some hospital bed? It's not unreasonable to think that head trauma could lead to the permanent changes in her eyesight and exacerbate what was probably already existing mental illness. And that also leads into physical therapy and the existing fatigue and body pain. It leads me to wonder if she's trying to get rid of her fear of heights in order to make another jump. There is also the O that she's so terrified of. To me, it looks like an eye, like a deep look into someone's pupil and we're being pulled in closer. That can play into the fear of being perceived or of having to interact with people and potentially get it wrong. Or it could also be something that looks similar to what we see on the way to her apartment. Maybe it was something she saw while on the way down. Steam user Luxanne also puts forward the theory that the O could be a top-down view of the apartment complex she lives in, again, being related to the protagonist jumping and seeing that view during the fall. Others have also brought forward the idea of the protagonist having DID, previously known as multiple personality disorder. We, the player, are then one of her alters. It would also be an explanation for the long gaps of memory loss that she claims. Some other folks brought up the concept that we are the medication. And if we are the medication, that would make the bit about the medication wearing off make more sense. Because the longer we go, the more it wears off, which lets us blur the line between player and protagonist until we're cut out of the equation entirely, having no input after suggesting going home. However, at the end of the day, none of the theorizing even matters. What happened doesn't really matter. What matters more is the snapshot into a life with severe mental illness and how that makes you feel. I'm not afraid to say I've had my own mental health struggles. It's healthy to talk about, but it's never been in this variety, I guess you could say. I've never had visual or auditory hallucinations, and those are a huge part of this game. I mean, hell, we are some of the hallucinations in the game. So having a glimpse into that, for me, really kind of hit home. The self-deprecation and the resignation of another medication not working, it was relatable. Strangers feeling ever mocking and hostile also felt relatable. However, this game turns it up to an extreme, taking that idea and morphing it into a literal vision of these strange aliens accosting the protagonist, while at the same time being baffled at the idea of someone harming a helpless innocent like yourself. Or maybe they're even afraid of you, your struggles turning yourself into the alien. I am aware that there's a sequel to this game that is a bit longer. Its official name is Milk Outside a Bag of Milk Outside a Bag of Milk, but on the Steam page, its announcements seem to affectionately refer to it simply as Milk 2. One of the reviews that came up for me referenced this first game as a 15-minute panic, and Milk 2 as a 1-hour deep dive into a broken psyche. I have absolutely no idea if any of the questions or lines of thought from the first game make it into the second, but I do know it's been rotting in my Steam library long enough. I do also see that Nikita Kroikov has another game in development. There's no release date yet, but it's titled 1000 The All-Mother's Embrace, and does appear to be another visual novel, but in a less abstract art style. I will for sure be checking that out once it releases, and if Milk Inside a Bag of Milk Inside a Bag of Milk is any indication for Kroikov's creative prowess, I'm sure that The All-Mother's Embrace will be a home run. But for me personally, I've already fallen in love with the Milk series and how it humanizes mental illness. Here, at the end of all things, I would also just like to let you know that I purposefully didn't watch any other video essays on it. Specifically, there's one by Play It Essays that's been popping up on my YouTube homepage off and on for a year now. So if I happen to draw any of the same conclusions or had similar points to someone else's video essay, I swear it's entirely coincidence. I hope you enjoyed the video, and now I'm off to go clean out my Watch Later playlist with everyone else who had something to say about this surreal, bite-sized trip to buy milk. Thank you for watching. Bye.